Tommy, hang on, I'm here. Grace's voice trembled, her hands gripping the fire axe as she stared at the gleaming Proton 7, locked behind its glass cage in a Malibu mansion. A blackout trapped them, and Tommy, the frail 7-year-old son of tech mogul Edward Harris, was fading fast, his breath shallow from a brutal asthma attack. Grace faced an impossible choice: obey Harris's ironclad rules or shatter the glass to save Tommy's life. When the axe swung, the crash echoed like a gunshot, a bold act that could cost her everything. What drove her to this desperate moment? Will the prototype deliver salvation or disaster? Hey, if you're gripped by this tale, hit that subscribe button and share where you're tuning in from, day or night. Drop your predictions below. How will Grace's daring choice unfold? Stick around to find out. The Malibu mansion perched on the cliff like a glass sentinel, its sleek lines and chrome accents glinting under the California sun. Inside, every surface gleamed with sterile perfection: marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and walls of tinted glass that framed the Pacific's restless waves. The air hummed with the soft whir of automated systems, lights that flickered to life at a whisper, doors that slid open with a thought, and a security network that watched every corner like an unblinking god. Yet for all its opulence, the house felt hollow, a gilded cage where warmth was an afterthought. Grace Washington moved through the grand foyer, her black maid's uniform, crisp white apron, starched collar, feeling like a costume from another era. At 32, her dark skin glowed under the soft lighting, but her eyes, sharp and searching, betrayed a mind that never rested. She adjusted a tray of Tommy's breakfast: oatmeal with sliced strawberries, a glass of orange juice, her hands steady despite the weight of the day. Tommy Harris, the 7-year-old heir to this empire of glass and steel, was her charge, her shadow, her reason for staying in a place that felt more like a museum than a home. "Miss Grace, can we play pirates today?" Tommy's voice, small but bright, echoed from the living room. He sat cross-legged on a plush rug, his pale cheeks flushed with the effort of speaking. His blonde hair fell in soft curls, framing eyes too big for his fragile frame. Asthma clung to him like a cruel shadow, stealing his breath at the worst moments, but his spirit burned fiercely. Grace smiled, setting the tray on a low table. "Pirates, huh? Only if you eat first, Captain Tommy." She ruffled his hair, her touch gentle but firm. He grinned, revealing a gap where a front tooth had recently fallen out. Their bond was unspoken, forged in quiet moments. Storybooks read under blankets, secret giggles when she snuck him an extra cookie. In this house where Edward Harris's rules governed every inch, Grace was Tommy's anchor. Edward Harris, the tech titan, was a ghost in his own home. His presence lingered in the directives delivered via encrypted messages, his voice a cold baritone in pre-recorded instructions. "The Proton 7 is off limits," he'd declared in one such message, his image flickering on a wall-mounted screen. "It's a prototype, a trade secret. No one touches it." The Proton 7, a sleek, autonomous car, sat enshrined in a glass case in the mansion's lower level, its curves gleaming like a forbidden jewel. Grace had seen it once, its dashboard a constellation of blinking lights, its purpose shrouded in mystery. Harris's obsession with it was palpable, a warning woven into every rule: touch it and you're out. Grace glanced at the digital clock on the wall. 9:15 a.m. The day felt heavier than usual, the air thick with an unspoken tension. She knelt beside Tommy, watching him poke at his oatmeal. "Eat up, kiddo. We've got adventures to plan." He nodded, but his eyes drifted to the window, where clouds gathered on the horizon, dark and swollen. A news alert flashed on the living room's smart screen. "Storm warning, high winds and potential blackouts expected in Los Angeles County by evening." Grace's stomach tightened. Storms were trouble for Tommy. Humidity could trigger his asthma, and the mansion's systems, for all their sophistication, were finicky in bad weather. "Miss Grace, do you think Dad's coming home soon?" Tommy's question was soft, almost hopeful. Grace hesitated. Harris was in New York, or maybe Tokyo. His schedule was as elusive as his affection. She forced a smile. "Soon, Tommy. He's just busy making the world spin." She stood, smoothing her apron, and checked the medical kit on the counter. Tommy's inhaler was there, half full, a lifeline she always kept close. She made a mental note to request a refill, her fingers brushing the cold steel of the kit. Routine was her armor in this house, but today something felt off, like a crack in the mansion's perfect facade. The storm warning wasn't the only shadow. Grace had overheard the staff whispering about the Proton 7, rumors of its untested systems, its potential for chaos if mishandled. She pushed the thought away, focusing on Tommy. He was drawing now, a crayon sketch of a pirate ship, his small hands trembling slightly. "Look, Grace, it's got cannons," he said, holding it up. She laughed, but her eyes flicked to the window again. The clouds were closer, their edges bruised purple. "Cannons, huh? Better make it sturdy for the storm, Captain." She winked, but her heart wasn't in it. The mansion's systems beeped softly, a reminder of their omnipresence. Lights adjusted automatically, a thermostat hummed, and somewhere below, the Proton 7 sat silent in its glass tomb. Grace felt a chill, not from the air, but from a premonition she couldn't shake. Tommy coughed, a small, dry sound, and her hand instinctively went to the inhaler. It was fine, she told herself. Everything was fine. But the storm was coming, and with it, a test she couldn't foresee. The golden cage of the mansion, with its rules and secrets, was about to become a battlefield. Grace didn't know it yet, but her loyalty to Tommy would soon collide with Harris's ironclad decrees, and the Proton 7, that untouchable relic, would be her only way out. Grace's heart lurched as Tommy's cough deepened, a ragged wheeze cutting through the hum of the mansion's automated systems. She dropped to her knees beside him, the pirate drawing forgotten on the rug. His small chest heaved, each breath a struggle, his blue eyes wide with panic. "Grace!" "It hurts," he gasped, clutching her arm. Her fingers flew to the medical kit, snatching the inhaler. She shook it, pressed it to his lips, and squeezed. A faint puff, then nothing. Empty. Her stomach plummeted. "Hold on, Tommy. Just breathe slow," she said, her voice steady despite the fear clawing her chest. She scanned the living room, its sterile elegance mocking her urgency. The smart screen flickered, the storm warning now a red alert. "Power outages imminent. Seek shelter." Outside, the sky had turned a sickly gray, winds howling like a chorus of ghosts against the mansion's glass walls. Grace lunged for the phone panel, jabbing the emergency button. Silence. No dial tone, no response. The system was dead, severed by the storm's wrath. She tried her cell phone. No signal. The mansion's security protocols, designed to protect, had turned it into a fortress, locking them in with no way out. The front doors, reinforced with biometric locks, wouldn't budge without power. The windows, bulletproof and sealed, offered no escape. They were trapped. "Tommy, stay with me," she whispered, cradling his face. His lips were tinged blue, his breath shallow and frantic. She rummaged through the medical kit again, praying for a spare inhaler. Nothing. Her mind raced, calculating options. The nearest hospital was 10 miles away, unreachable without a car. The staff garage held a maintenance truck, but the keys were in the security office, locked behind another biometric panel. Despair clawed at her, but she shoved it down. Tommy needed her. She carried him to the couch, his small body limp in her arms. His eyes fluttered, half closed, and her heart screamed. She couldn't lose him. Not Tommy, not the boy who'd drawn her a pirate ship, who'd trusted her when no one else did. She pressed her forehead to his, whispering, "We're going to be okay, Captain, I promise." But the promise felt hollow, the mansion's silence deafening. Then her eyes caught it, a faint glow from the staircase leading to the lower level. The Proton 7. Its glass case was wired to a backup generator, a precaution Harris had insisted on. The car sat there, untouchable, a sleek beast of chrome and mystery. Grace's pulse quickened. It was their only chance. A car that could drive itself, that didn't need keys or power grids. But Harris's warning echoed in her mind. No one touches it. Break that rule, and she'd lose everything. Her job, her livelihood, maybe more. She shook her head, banishing the thought. Tommy's life was worth more than rules. She scooped him up, his weight feather light, but crushing her heart. "Hang on, kiddo," she murmured, descending the stairs. The lower level was a cathedral of technology, all polished concrete and soft lighting. The Proton 7 gleamed in its case, its curves seductive, its dashboard dark but alive with potential. Grace set Tommy down gently on the floor, his wheezes growing fainter. She circled the glass case, her maid's apron brushing the cold surface. The fire axe hung on the wall nearby, a relic of safety protocols. Her hands trembled as she gripped it, the weight unfamiliar but solid. She glanced at Tommy, his small form curled against the base of the case, his face pale as moonlight. "I'm sorry, Mr. Harris," she whispered, raising the axe, "but I'm not losing him." The first swing cracked the glass, a spider web of fractures spreading like lightning. The second swing shattered it, shards raining down with a sound like 1,000 bells. An alarm blared, shrill and relentless, but Grace didn't flinch. She stepped over the debris, her shoes crunching, and opened the Proton 7's door. The interior smelled of leather and metal, a cockpit from the future. She lifted Tommy inside, buckling him into the passenger seat. His head lolled, but his chest still rose, faint but fighting. Now the real challenge, starting the car. The dashboard was a maze of buttons and screens, locked behind Harris's security. Grace's heart sank. She had no code, no biometric key. Then she remembered Tommy's tablet, tucked in his backpack upstairs. He'd shown her once, giggling, how he'd saved his father's passwords in a digital journal, a child's rebellion against rules. "You're a genius, Tommy," she whispered, sprinting back upstairs. The tablet was buried under crayons and books. She powered it on, her fingers shaking as she scrolled through Tommy's notes. There, a string of numbers labeled Dad's car code. She memorized it, racing back to the Proton 7. The alarm still screamed, the storm's wind rattling the mansion's walls. She slid into the driver's seat, Tommy's shallow breaths her only guide. Her hands hovered over the dashboard. "Please work," she prayed, entering the code. The screen flickered. A low hum filled the car. The Proton 7 was alive. The Proton 7's dashboard glowed to life, a constellation of lights pulsing like a heartbeat. Grace exhaled, her breath shaky, as the car's engine purred beneath her. Tommy slumped in the passenger seat, his wheezes faint, his pale face ghostly under the dashboard's blue hue. The alarm's wail clawed at her nerves, but she shut it out, her focus razor-sharp. "We're getting out of here, Tommy," she whispered, her voice a lifeline in the chaos. She punched the code again, praying it would unlock the garage's security gate. A low groan echoed as the gate slid open, revealing the storm's fury beyond. Wind screaming, rain lashing like a whip. Grace's hands hovered over the steering wheel, useless in a car that drove itself. The Proton 7 lurched forward, its sensors scanning the rain-slicked driveway. She gripped Tommy's hand, his fingers cold but twitching, a sign he was still fighting. The car accelerated, tires humming against the pavement, and the mansion's glass walls faded into the storm's gray veil. Grace's heart pounded, a mix of terror and hope. She'd broken Harris's sacred rule, shattered his precious case, and now she was riding a machine she didn't understand. But Tommy's life hung in the balance, and that was all that mattered. The Proton 7 navigated the winding cliff road with eerie precision, its headlights cutting through the downpour. Grace glanced at the dashboard screen, where a digital map plotted their route to St. John's Hospital, 10 miles away. Numbers ticked down, distance, time, speed, each second a pulse in their race against death. She leaned close to Tommy, brushing damp curls from his forehead. "You're my brave captain, okay? We're almost there." His eyelids fluttered, but no words came, only a faint wheeze that tore at her soul. Outside, the storm raged, trees bending under the wind's assault, debris skittering across the road. The car swerved smoothly, avoiding a fallen branch, its systems unfazed by the chaos. Grace marveled at its calm, a stark contrast to her churning fear. She'd heard the whispers about Proton 7, untested, unstable, a gamble Harris had locked away for a reason. What if it failed now? What if she'd traded one trap for another? She pushed the thought down, focusing on Tommy's shallow breaths. Doubt was a luxury she couldn't afford. Her mind flashed to Harris's cold voice, his warnings about the prototype. "You'll lose everything," she could almost hear him say. Her job, her savings, her future, gone in one swing of the axe. But then Tommy coughed, a weak, desperate sound, and her resolve hardened. She'd face Harris's wrath, his lawsuits, anything, as long as Tommy lived. She stroked his hand, whispering, "Stay with me, kiddo. We're pirates, remember? We don't give up." The car's interior was a cocoon of leather and steel, its hum a steady reassurance. But Grace felt exposed, a trespasser in Harris's domain. The dashboard beeped, a warning about low visibility, and the car slowed, adjusting to the storm's hazards. She wanted to scream, to urge it faster, but she was powerless. A passenger in a machine that held their fate. The hospital was close, maybe 5 miles now, but each second stretched into eternity. Tommy's breathing grew fainter, his lips bluer. Grace's chest tightened, her breath sinking with his, as if she could will him to keep going. She thought of the mansion, its lifeless perfection now a distant memory. Breaking the glass had been her rebellion, a crack in Harris's world of rules. But this, trusting a machine she didn't understand, was her leap of faith. The Proton 7 turned sharply, navigating a flooded intersection, its tires gripping the road like a predator. Grace held Tommy tighter, her maid's apron damp with rain that had slipped through the open garage. She was no hero, just a woman who loved a boy like her own. But love was enough to make her reckless. The dashboard chimed, pulling her from her thoughts. A message flashed. Destination approaching. ETA. 3 minutes. Relief surged, but it was fleeting. Tommy's eyes were closed now, his chest barely moving. "No, no, no," Grace whispered, shaking him gently. "Tommy, you stay with me." She pressed her fingers to his wrist, feeling a faint pulse. 3 minutes. They had to make it. The car sped up, its systems sensing the urgency. Or maybe it was just her imagination. She didn't care. All that mattered was the hospital's lights, faint but growing brighter through the rain. The storm roared, but the Proton 7 was relentless, a silver bullet slicing through the chaos. Grace's fear mingled with a strange awe. This machine, this forbidden thing was saving them. Or was it? Doubt crept in again. What if Harris was right? What if the prototype wasn't ready? She shoved the thought away, focusing on Tommy's face, his small hand in hers. "We're almost there, Captain," she said, her voice breaking. "You're gonna make it." The hospital loomed ahead, its emergency bay a beacon in the storm. The Proton 7 slowed, pulling up to the entrance with surgical precision. The doors slid open, and Grace unbuckled Tommy, lifting his limp body. Nurses rushed out, alerted by the car's system, their voices sharp with urgency. "Asthma attack, 7-year-old, no inhaler," Grace shouted, her words nearly lost in the wind. They took Tommy, whisking him inside, and Grace followed, her heart a drumbeat of hope and dread. The Proton 7 sat silent behind her, its job done, for now. Grace stumbled into the hospital's emergency bay, her arms empty now, Tommy's small form whisked away by nurses in a blur of white coats and urgent voices. The storm's roar faded behind her, replaced by the sterile hum of fluorescent lights and the sharp scent of antiseptic. Her maid's apron clung to her, soaked from the rain, her heart hammering as she watched the double doors swing shut behind Tommy. "Please," she whispered, her hands clasped tight. "Let him be okay." The Proton 7 idled outside, its silver frame glistening under the hospital's floodlights, a silent witness to her desperate gamble. She'd gotten him here, but the cost loomed large. Harris's wrath, the broken glass, the violation of his untouchable prototype. She sank into a plastic chair, her legs trembling, the adrenaline draining like water through sand. The waiting room was a cold limbo, its beige walls and muted TV offering no comfort. A nurse approached, clipboard in hand. "You're with the boy? We need his medical history," she said, her tone brisk but kind. Grace nodded, her voice hoarse as she rattled off Tommy's asthma details, the empty inhaler, the storm that had trapped them. The nurse scribbled, then paused. "That car out there, It alerted us before you arrived. Never seen anything like it. Grace forced a smile, her mind racing. The Proton 7 had done more than drive. It had saved precious seconds. But at what price? Her thoughts spiraled back to the mansion, to the shattered glass case, and the code she'd found in Tommy's tablet. That moment, scrolling through his digital journal, seeing Dad's car code in his childish scrawl, had been a lifeline. She typed those numbers with shaking hands, half expecting failure. When the dashboard lit up, it felt like a miracle. But miracles came with strings. Harris would know by now. Somewhere in New York or mid-flight, he'd have seen the security breach, the camera feed of her and Tommy and his precious prototype. She could almost hear his voice, cold and cutting. "You're finished, Grace." She glanced at the clock, 10:47 p.m. Time crawled, each tick a reminder of Tommy's fragile breasts. She stood, pacing, her shoes squeaking on the linoleum. The waiting room felt too small, the walls closing in like the mansion's locked doors. She needed to know Tommy was safe, needed to see his blue eyes open, his gap-toothed grin. But all she could do was wait, trapped again, this time by uncertainty. Her fingers brushed the damp apron, a relic of her old role. Maid, caretaker, invisible. Tonight she'd become something else. A rule breaker, a thief of secrets, a savior. A memory flashed. Tommy's laughter as he showed her his tablet, proud of his secret journal. "Dad doesn't know I keep his codes," he'd whispered, giggling like it was a game. That trust, that small act of rebellion, had saved him. Grace's chest ached with love and fear. She'd crossed a line, not just for Tommy but for herself, proving she was more than the uniform she wore. But Harris wouldn't see it that way. He'd see betrayal, a violation of his empire of control. The TV in the corner droned, a news anchor reporting on the storm's chaos. Flooded roads, downed power lines, a city on its knees. Grace barely listened, her eyes fixed on the double doors. A doctor emerged, his face unreadable. "Grace Washington?" he called. She shot to her feet, her heart in her throat. "Tommy's stable," he said, and relief crashed over her like a wave. "He's on oxygen and medication. You got him here just in time." She nodded, tears burning her eyes, but the doctor's next words chilled her. "Someone's here for you. Says he's the boy's father." Grace turned, and there he was. Edward Harris, striding through the hospital entrance, his tailored suit rumpled from travel, his face a storm of its own. His eyes locked on her, dark with fury, and her stomach twisted. "Miss Washington," he said, his voice low, dangerous. "What the hell have you done?" The words cut like glass, but Grace stood tall, her chin lifted. She'd saved Tommy, and no amount of Harris's anger could take that away. "You're welcome," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. Harris's jaw tightened, his gaze flicking to the Proton 7 outside, still parked like a sentinel. "You had no right," he snapped. "That car, it's untested, dangerous. You could have killed him." Grace's temper flared, but before she could retort, the doctor stepped in. "Mr. Harris, your son's alive because of her. That car got him here faster than an ambulance could have." Harris froze, his anger faltering. Grace saw it, a crack in his armor, a flicker of doubt. She seized it. "I didn't have a choice, Mr. Harris. The mansion locked us in. The inhaler was empty, and Tommy was dying. I'd do it again." Her voice broke, but her eyes held his, unyielding. Harris looked away, his hands clenching, and for a moment, silence hung heavy between them. The doctor cleared his throat. "Tommy's asking for you, Miss Washington." Grace nodded, brushing past Harris without a glance. She didn't need his approval, not now. Tommy was alive, and that was her victory. But as she walked toward the recovery room, Harris's voice followed her, softer now, almost broken. "We're not done, Grace." She didn't turn back. The fight was coming, but for now Tommy needed her, and nothing else mattered. Edward Harris's private jet sliced through the night, its engines a low roar against the storm's distant echo. He sat rigid in the leather seat, his jaw tight, eyes fixed on the tablet in his lap. The screen glowed with the security feed from the Proton 7, a grainy image of Grace Washington, her maid's apron stark against the car's sleek interior, cradling Tommy's limp form. Harris's fingers dug into the armrest, his knuckles white. She had no right, he muttered, the words bitter, almost a prayer. The alert had hit his smartwatch hours ago, a red pulse in the middle of a Manhattan boardroom. Security breach, Proton 7 activated. His empire of control was unraveling, and Grace, the quiet, obedient maid, had swung the axe. He replayed the footage, his mind racing. The shattered glass case, the blaring alarm, Grace's determined face as she entered the code. Tommy's code, stolen from his own son's tablet. Harris's chest burned with betrayal, but beneath it, a colder fear gnawed. The Proton 7 was his masterpiece, a prototype years from perfection, its systems untested in real-world chaos. What if it had crashed? What if Tommy, his only child, his fragile heir, had paid the price? He slammed the tablet down, ignoring the flight attendant's flinch. "How long until we land?" he barked. 30 minutes, sir," she replied, retreating. Harris stood, pacing the cabin, his tailored suit creased from hours of tension. He'd built his fortune on precision, on systems that obeyed his will. The Proton 7 was his legacy, a car that could think, move, save lives if he could perfect it. But Grace had hijacked it, turned his creation into her weapon. He tried accessing the car's remote override, but the storm's interference blocked the signal. "Damn it," he hissed, slamming a fist against the bulkhead. He was powerless, a feeling he hadn't known since childhood. His phone buzzed, a text from his security chief. Car reached St. John's Hospital. Boy in ER. Relief surged, sharp and fleeting, but anger quickly smothered it. Tommy was safe for now, but Grace had crossed a line. She'd exposed his prototype, risked his son, defied his rules. He pictured her in that ridiculous maid's uniform, her calm defiance, and his blood boiled. She'd pay for this. Lawsuits, termination, maybe worse. But the image of Tommy's pale face on the screen haunted him, a reminder of what he'd nearly lost. Harris sank back into his seat, rubbing his temples. He remembered the last time he'd seen Tommy, a fleeting visit between meetings, the boy's hopeful eyes asking for a story, a hug, anything. Harris had given him a pat on the head and a promise to return. Soon. Now, soon was too late, and Grace had filled the gap he'd left. The thought stung, a wound he hadn't expected. He opened the tablet again, pulling up the Proton 7's logs. The data was flawless. Perfect navigation, optimal speed, even an automatic alert to the hospital. The car had performed beyond his wildest hopes. So why did he feel like he'd failed? The jet began its descent, Los Angeles a smudge of lights through the storm. Harris's mind churned, replaying Grace's actions. She'd saved Tommy, yes, but at what cost to his vision? The Proton 7 was meant to debut on his terms, a controlled unveiling to cement his legacy. Now it was a rogue machine, driven by a maid who didn't understand its power. He clenched his fists, imagining the headlines. Tech mogul's secret prototype exposed. His investors would panic, his rivals would pounce. Grace had no idea what she'd unleashed. The jet touched down, and Harris was already moving, barking orders at his driver. St. John's Hospital now. The car sped through the rain-soaked streets, the city a blur of neon and chaos. He checked his watch, 11:12 p.m. Tommy was in there fighting, and Grace was waiting, her defiance a challenge he couldn't ignore. He tried to focus, to plan his words, but the image of Tommy's blue lips kept intruding, a silent accusation. What kind of father left his son to a maid's care? What kind of man built a machine but couldn't save his child? As the hospital loomed, its emergency bay glowing through the downpour, Harris steeled himself. He'd confront Grace, demand answers, reclaim control. The Proton 7 sat outside, its sleek frame untouched by the storm, a testament to his genius and her audacity. He stepped out, rain soaking his suit, and strode toward the entrance. The doors slid open, revealing Grace, her apron damp, her eyes unyielding. "Miss Washington," he said, his voice ablade. "What the hell have you done?" Her response hit like a slap. "You're welcome." The words were calm, defiant, and they stopped him cold. Before he could fire back, a doctor stepped in, his voice cutting through the tension. "Mr. Harris, your son's alive because of her." Harris's anger wavered. his gaze flicking to the Proton 7 outside. For the first time, he wondered if Grace had done what he couldn't, if she'd turned his machine into something more than a prototype, but he wasn't ready to admit it. Not yet. Grace stood by Tommy's bedside, her hands still clasped around his, the steady beep of the monitor anchoring her in the quiet recovery room. Edward Harris's presence loomed, his damp suit and shadowed eyes filling the space with a tension thicker than the storm outside. His words, "We need to talk," hung in the air, sharp and heavy, a blade waiting to fall. Grace met his gaze, her apron wrinkled but her spine straight, her defiance a quiet fire. She'd saved his son, but the cost of her rebellion was about to be measured. "About Tommy or your car?" she repeated, her voice low, daring him to choose. Harris's jaw clenched, his hands flexing as if grasping for control. He stepped closer, his voice a hiss. "You broke into my prototype, Grace. You stole a code, endangered my son, and exposed my work. Do you have any idea what you've done?" His words were a lash, each one cutting deeper, but Grace didn't flinch. She'd expected this, braced for it since the moment she swung the axe. "I saved him," she said, her tone steady, eyes locked on his. "Your mansion locked us in, your systems failed us, and Tommy was dying. I did what I had to." Her voice trembled, not with fear but with the weight of truth. She gestured to Tommy, his small chest rising under the oxygen mask, his face peaceful in sleep. "Look at him, Mr. Harris. He's here because I broke your rules." Harris's gaze flicked to Tommy, and for a moment his anger faltered, replaced by a flicker of something softer, guilt perhaps, or gratitude he couldn't yet voice. But it vanished quickly, his control snapping back. "That car wasn't ready," he said, his voice rising. "It's untested, a risk. You could have crashed, killed him, ruined everything I've built." He paced, his shoes clicking on the linoleum, a man unraveling under the weight of his empire. Grace's temper flared, her patience worn thin by exhaustion and fear. "Everything you've built?" she shot back. "What about what you've ignored? Tommy needed you, not a machine. I was there when you weren't." The words spilled out, raw and unfiltered, years of watching Tommy's loneliness fueling her fire. Harris stopped pacing, his face a mask of shock, as if her words had struck a nerve he'd long buried. Before he could respond, the doctor re-entered, his presence a sudden calm in the storm. "Mr. Harris, Miss Washington," he said, his tone firm but measured. "I need to clarify something. Your son's condition was critical. If he'd arrived even 5 minutes later, we might not be having this conversation." He looked at Grace, his eyes kind. "That car, whatever it is, got him here faster than any ambulance could have. Its alert gave us his vitals before he even arrived. She made the right call." Harris's mouth opened, then closed, his argument crumbling. He looked at Tommy, then at Grace, his eyes searching her face as if seeing her for the first time. She held his gaze unyielding, her heart pounding, but her resolve unshaken. The doctor's words were her vindication, but they also forced Harris to confront a truth he'd avoided. His son's life had hung on Grace's courage, not his technology. He turned away, running a hand through his hair, his shoulders slumping. "I need to see the data," he muttered almost to himself. He pulled out his tablet, pulling up the Proton 7's logs with a few sharp taps. Grace watched, her breath catching as he scrolled through the numbers. Speed, route, vitals. His brow furrowed, then softened, a quiet awe breaking through his anger. "It adjusted for him," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "It detected his condition, prioritized safety, and alerted the hospital." He looked up, his eyes meeting hers, and for the first time, there was no accusation, only questions. Grace seized the moment. "It's a good car, Mr. Harris," she said softly, "but it didn't save him. I did. I chose to act." Her words were gentle but firm, a challenge wrapped in truth. Harris's face tightened, but he didn't argue. Instead, he looked at Tommy, his expression raw, a father's love warring with his pride. "I wasn't there," he admitted, his voice breaking, so quiet Grace almost missed it. "I should have been." The confession hung heavy, a crack in his armor. Grace felt a pang of sympathy, but she didn't soften. He needed to hear it, to feel it. She nodded, letting the silence speak. The doctor cleared his throat. Tommy's stable, but he'll need rest. You can both stay. He left and the room fell quiet again. The monitors beep a steady pulse. Harris sat beside Tommy, his hand hovering over his son's, before finally resting there, tentative, like a man relearning how to feel. Grace watched, her heart aching for them both. She'd fought for Tommy, but this moment, father and son, wasn't hers to claim. "I'm not sorry," she said finally, her voice soft but resolute. "I'd break every rule again for him." Harris looked up, his eyes conflicted, but no longer hostile. He nodded a small gesture, but it felt like a truce. Grace stepped back, giving him space, her role as protector, shifting, if only for now. The fight wasn't over, but she'd won this round, not just for Tommy, but for herself. The hospital room's quiet hum faded into memory as Grace stood on a sleek stage 3 weeks later. The Los Angeles skyline glittering through the convention center's glass walls. The air buzzed with anticipation, reporters' cameras flashing, tech moguls and investors murmuring in their seats. Edward Harris stood at the podium, his suit immaculate, his face no longer shadowed by anger, but lit with a quiet intensity. The Proton 7 gleamed behind him, its silver curves a star under the spotlights. No longer a secret, but a symbol. Grace, still in her simple black dress, her maid's apron retired, stood beside Tommy, his small hand warm in hers, his gap-toothed grin bright as he waved at the crowd. He was whole again, his asthma tamed, his spirit unbroken. Harris raised a hand, silencing the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice steady but carrying a weight that hadn't been there before. "The Proton 7 was meant to be my legacy, a machine that could change lives." He paused, his eyes finding Grace's, a flicker of gratitude passing between them. "But today, I'm not here to talk about technology. I'm here to tell you a story about courage, about a woman who turned my creation into something more." The crowd leaned forward, drawn by the shift in his tone. Grace's heart thudded, her cheeks warming as Harris recounted the night of the storm, the mansion's failure, Tommy's crisis, her desperate swing of the axe. His words painted her not as a maid, but as a hero, each sentence stripping away the invisibility of her old role. "Grace Washington didn't just break a rule," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "She broke through my blindness. I built a machine, but she gave it purpose." The room erupted in applause and Tommy squeezed her hand, whispering, "That's you, Miss Grace." She blinked back tears, her throat tight. The memory of that night, Tommy's shallow breaths, the Proton 7's relentless drive, Harris's fury in the hospital, felt both distant and raw. She'd expected punishment, not praise, yet here she was, standing in a spotlight she'd never sought. Harris continued, his gaze sweeping the crowd. "I was wrong to think technology alone could define us. Without the human heart, it's just metal and code." He turned to Grace, his voice softening. "Grace showed me that. She saved my son, and in doing so, she saved me." The applause swelled again, but Grace's eyes were on Harris, seeing the man beneath the mogul. In the hospital, his confession, "I wasn't there," had been a crack in his armor. Now he was laying it bare, admitting his flaws to the world. She respected that, even if the wound of his initial anger still lingered. Tommy tugged her hand, pointing to the Proton 7. "It's our pirate ship, right?" he whispered, and she laughed, the sound easing the tension in her chest. Harris raised a hand again, the room falling silent. "Today, I'm announcing the Harris Foundation for Ethical Technology," he said, his voice firm. "Its mission is to ensure our creations serve humanity, not control it, and I'm appointing Grace Washington as its director." Gasps rippled through the crowd, cameras flashing wildly. Grace froze, her breath catching. Director? She was a maid, a caretaker, not a leader in a world of tech giants. But Harris's eyes held hers, steady and certain. "You've earned this," he said, loud enough for only her to hear. "You're the heart of this." She nodded, overwhelmed, her mind racing. This wasn't a gift. It was a responsibility, a chance to shape the future, to ensure no one else was trapped by systems that failed them. She thought of Tommy, of the mansion's cold walls, of the Proton 7's flawless drive. She could do this, For him, for others like him. The crowd cheered, and Tommy hugged her, his small arms fierce. "You're gonna be the boss, Miss Grace," he said, and she laughed again, ruffling his hair. Harris stepped back, gesturing to the Proton 7. "This car isn't just a prototype anymore," he said. "It's proof that when courage meets innovation, we can do the impossible." The crowd rose, clapping, as the stage lights bathed the car in a golden glow. Grace looked at it, no longer a forbidden relic, but a bridge between her world and Harris's. She'd feared its power, but she'd wielded it, turned it into salvation. As the event ended, Harris approached Tommy between them. "I meant what I said, Grace," he murmured. "You changed everything." She met his gaze, seeing a father, not a titan. "So did you, Mr. Harris," she replied, her voice soft but firm. "You just needed a push." They stood together, the three of them, the Proton 7 behind them, a symbol of what they had overcome. The crowd's cheers faded, but the moment lingered. A family forged in crisis, a future reshaped by one woman's heart. Grace squeezed Tommy's hand, her eyes on the horizon, ready for whatever came next. As the curtains closed on the prototype and the reluctant operator, Grace, Tommy, and the Proton 7 leave us with a story of courage, defiance, and the unbreakable bond of the human heart. What did you feel as Grace shattered that glass, as Harris faced his flaws, or as Tommy's small hand held hers through it all? Drop your thoughts below. Your predictions, your emotions. What moved you most? Share where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. We'd love to hear. Thank you for joining us on this thrilling ride, for cheering Grace's bravery and Tommy's fight. Your support keeps these stories alive. Until next time, keep chasing the stories that spark your heart. See you soon.